Given that the cruise missiles were launched without any advance warning, what steps?
Those cruise missiles were intended for ground targets, and obviously it is for the Russians to have done that without giving any warning is a further indication that they're not thinking through the consequences of their conduct, but they were not, their targets were intended to be ground targets. With respect to the air, I think we've made it clear, and the Turks have made it very clear, that we're not prepared to have any impediments to our conduct of our counter-ISIL campaign, and of course NATO stands strongly behind the integrity of Turkish airspace. With respect to the other, I can't confirm those reports about that you alluded to about anti-tank weapons to the Syrian rebels, but these are the kinds of things that are indications of the continuation of the civil war in Syria.
Well, we've been concerned for some time about the build-up of Russian forces. It's one of the reasons why it's so important for us and other countries to continue to meet the NATO investment pledge, to start increasing our defense spending. And I and Secretary Carter yesterday encouraged our allies in NATO to match that pledge in the same way. So far as the build-up on the Eastern Mediterranean or ships passing through the Bosphorus is concerned, it's yet another reminder to NATO that NATO has to look to its collective security as a whole. There is pressure, of course, on the eastern flank. There is concern in Norway about the movement of Russian aircraft and ships and submarines to the north. But now we have, for the first time, a very real demonstration of Russian pressure on the southern flank. So we need to look to our collective security.
Thank you. Mina Harbello from Al Jazeera channel. Our correspondents in Syria are reporting on how the Russians...
And for the United States, for its part, but I think this is true of the entire coalition, is there to combat extremism. It is not there to combat all of the opposition to Assad, because some of that opposition, the so-called moderate opposition, needs to be part of a Syrian political future after Assad and after the transition. So
well, I too deplore the bombing of opposition groups in Syria simply because they are opposition groups. That's very regrettable, and in particular the mounting toll of civilian casualties through what looks like the use of unguided as well as guided munitions, as Secretary Carter has said, being deployed quite indiscriminately in civilian areas. We have been very careful as part of the coalition strikes in Iraq to avoid civilian casualties, and I find it very, very regrettable that we appear to have seen so many civilian casualties just in the last few days through this indiscriminate bombing of areas that are nothing to do with ISIL at all.
I can't confirm those reports, but I'm not surprised by taking the side of Assad against all opponents in Syria. Russia has, as we have said repeatedly, made itself a target. And so I expect that Russian forces will come under attack. And a point I've made to the Russians myself over time is that by inflaming the kind of extremism that ISIL represents, Russia itself has suffered in Russia from exactly that kind of extremism. This is why it is not in any way, shape, or form truly in Russia's self-interest to further inflame the Syrian civil war, and that's what's happening under their approach.